and it's good to really dive in and look in underneath and see what Hartford has to offer when it comes to specifically data breach coverage, which is what we're going to cover today. So during this session, what we're going to cover is what data breach is, why the coverage is important, who needs the coverage, and how Hartford's coverage is different. So we'll be reviewing all of these today. So let's start off with really the definition. What exactly is data breach? So the definition of data breach is the loss, theft, accidental release, or publication of customer employee, what we call PII, which is personally identifiable information. So what really constitutes personally identifiable information? So this is going to be anything from full name and email address, social security information, driver's license information, bank account number, credit or debit card information, client legal data records, or even patient medical history information as well too. And a little known fact, I'm sure everybody's heard of all of the big stories in the news, whether it's from Target, Sony, Anthem, Home Depot. But would it surprise any of you to know that 71% of all data breaches are against small businesses? So we hear about the big ones in the news, but the reality is most of these breaches that are occurring are among small businesses. And it's really because they don't have the infrastructure in place to protect themselves like they would some of the big businesses. And in addition, 95% of all credit card thefts are against small businesses. So what are maybe some of the common ways that you would think this would occur? Let's kind of discuss that now. Oftentimes when people hear the term data breach, they kind of associate it with hackers breaking into a computer system. But the reality is the data breach can happen in much simpler ways. And here are some examples on the screen. From missing or stolen laptops, USB flash drives, they hold a lot of information on there. Mismailing, just think about within your own email chats back and forth how occasionally you send the wrong email to the wrong person. Imagine if there was some personally identifiable information that was in that email and it got into the wrong person's hand. You could have a breach on your hand. Erroneous data posted in public place. Loss of theft of physical documents, not just electronically, like paper. And this is one key differentiator with Hartford because we do include paper and not all carriers do. Just think about how many documents you have within your own agency, and if they weren't shredded properly, or if a piece of paper got into the wrong person's hand, again, you could have a breach on your hand. Of course, it happens with computer hacking as well too. That is among one of the ways in which breaches occur. But again, that's not typically the common way, especially with small businesses. Unauthorized employee disclosure or employee error or oversight, simple as misplacing a paper document again. So clearly, clients are at risk. So how do you really prepare and protect your clients? You really need not only a comprehensive program, which includes preventative measures, but also first-party and third-party coverage when a breach occurs. So the first step is, how do we help prepare our clients? So let's take a look. So not only does Hartford provide competitive protection after a breach occurs, we're committed to helping the small business owners avoid a breach to begin with. So we have access to credit monitoring, assistance in developing an incident response plan, compliance and privacy counseling, helplines with unlimited access to a response team, data breach preparedness website with a comprehensive set of resources. So this way your insureds can actually proactively prepare themselves to make sure this doesn't happen to begin with. Also monitoring services up to a year which monitor credit, fraud, public records, and other alerts. Now the second step is really protecting your clients by educating them on obtaining Hartford's first-party response expense coverage and third-party defense and liability coverage. So let's cover that. So first-party coverage is designed to pay for the expenses that an insured incurs when a breach occurs. So this coverage is triggered upon discovery of the data breach, and it includes notification expenses. So this is the cost to notify a person that their personally identifiable information is subject to a breach. Legal and forensic services, which investigates whether or not the breach occurred. Crisis management and public relation expenses. And this really helps minimize the potential harm to an insured's reputation. Imagine what this would do to a small business owner in their local community. And also good faith advertising expenses. Again, an organized way to have the insured have a media response plan in place. And then just think about how many customer files are in your own agency. Everybody says they go paperless, but there's still a lot of files that we have in place, right? So guess what? If a breach occurred, it would be, on average, per client record, $188. And everybody always asks, why is that so high? The reality is, even if one file is compromised, you're legally required to notify every single client of the breach. And it gets more complicated than that, too, because now there's 45 states that have data breach laws in place. And the state laws, obviously, are different for each state. And it's not based on where that business is located, but it's based on where their clients are located. So just think of a typical retail store. They're going to have multiple states that are probably going to be affected because they're going to have people that do frequent their establishment out of state. And they're going to need to know how to navigate the laws and regulations of each of those states. And that's really where Hartford's response plan comes into play, because we have access to sources that help them navigate through how they're going to respond with each of those state laws as well. Now, a lot of agents really utilize this figure to really help sell the policy. You know, you can even round it up to $200 and think about how many clients your small business owners have, and do the simple math to realize the cost impact that a breach would have on them. And are most small businesses prepared to, you know, write a check for that if something like that happened? Most of them are not. So that's our first party. Now let's talk about third party. So third party definition provides coverage for losses arising from civil awards, settlements, and judgments an insured is legally obligated to pay as a result of a data breach claim. So this coverage is selected after first party response is selected. And just think about how many of these data breaches always follow with a lawsuit. There is not one that you don't see in the news. You know, the first headline is about the breach, and typically the second headline is about the clients that are pulling together and suing. So third party is very key. And just so you know, data breach can be added midterm. Coverage has a retroactive date, which is the policy effective date. But we've made some upgrades to our data breach coverage, and we're going to cover that as well too. So some additional options with it, and let's cover those. So Hartford began offering data breach back in 2011, and we were actually the first one to offer this coverage by endorsement to a business owner's policies. And as times have changed, new risks have emerged, and we've identified opportunities to really strengthen our product offering. So businesses are in better position to prevail. So now customers can purchase business income and extra expense with supplements that align with first-party limits. And our first-party limits go up to $500,000. And with this business income and extra expense, waiting periods options of 8, 24, 48, or 72 hours are available. What we're seeing with these breaches is oftentimes businesses have to you know, close their business for a couple of days to figure out where the breach is occurring, or for some of the smaller businesses, they may be the one that opens up the doors every day, and they have to work with investigators to figure out you know, what's going on, and they may have to close their doors. So now we've got options for business income and extra expense as well. Unfortunately, a lot of these breaches are now coming with ransom notes as well too. So we actually have supplements options that align with first-party limit options. So, an email that's sent that says, if you don't provide X amount of dollars in the next 2 weeks, we're going to go ahead and release this information to the public. So now we have ransom and extortion. And a lot of times these breaches aren't discovered for years. So we now have prior acts coverage for data breach as well too, 1, 2, or 3 years. And this really allows you to really customize the data breach coverage based on your particular small business owner's needs. Now also included, we have international coverage. And this will be included on both first and third-party base forms, and international coverage for personally identifiable information that's held outside of the US, Puerto Rico, and Canada. And now we're offering more limits and deductible options as well too. So our first-party coverage limit, we can go up to $500,000, and deductible options range anywhere from $1,000 all the way up to $100,000. And of course, third-party, we've increased our limits up to $1 million, and the same deductible options here, up to $1,000 to $100,000. And then just so you know, we do have standalone within our other products of suites as well too, beyond small commercial. But these are things that can be added right onto the box. So data breach is written according to classification-specific hazard level. So each classification is designated as either low, medium, or high. If it's low, there's typically no underwriting questions that we have with that. It's just an automatic eligibility. Same with what we consider medium to high hazard with annual receipts of $250,000 or less. But when we get into some of our more medium to high hazard with annual receipts over $250,000, we will require at least for the clients to have password protection, firewalls, and antivirus software and data encryption. And most, somewhat larger businesses are going to have these in place. So hopefully you learned a few things about data breach, particularly how Hartford really sets the policy apart. Not a lot of carriers offer third-party coverage. It's something that Hartford offers at a pretty big limit, so you can go up to $1 million for that third party. We also cover paper, which not all carriers cover as well too. So it's a great opportunity to really educate your clients on Hartford's data breach coverage and services, and really help protect your clients by offering coverage like this to your small business owners. It's kind of like the new EPLI. Everybody's adding data breach. It's such an important coverage. It's one of the fastest growing crimes out there. So let's go ahead and book some data breach coverage. With that, I'm going to kind of shoot it back over to Dwight. Hopefully you guys learned a few new things about data breach. We're going to go through some Q&A.
Yeah, you bet. So we have quite a few questions. One of the first ones is somebody asked if there was a brochure with the data breach statistics on it, and I think there is. I have one that is great, and maybe Tracy, if you can share one.
What we have as well. Yep.
And it does go over why small businesses need it, and it's interesting to see. You mentioned it was kind of similar to the EPLI coverages, and it is. The adoption rate seems to be skyrocketing right now. We're quoting on 2 large online retailers and a telecommunications provider that both of them have new cyber liability requirements in their contract. So I think once some of these larger Fortune 500 type companies start pushing it down, we'll see even more adoption. But our close rate is going through the roof. So another one is business income for cloud service. So is there a business income limit for cloud service, or is there a sub-limit, and how does that work?
Oh, that's awesome. Someone must be knowing about our new features within our coverages. So we just introduced business income for cloud interruption service. just a couple months ago, and it is we're the first to market with it, and it is a coverage that is separate from data breach, so it's another option that you can add onto the policy. $25,000 in coverage with just a 12-hour waiting period. Obviously, more and more businesses are working on the cloud. And there's, coverage in your standard policy for business income in the event of power outage, but what about cloud service interruption? There's nothing like it out there on the marketplace right now. We're first to market with it. About 30% of businesses have and work on a cloud right now, and we expect in about 5 years for that number to be up towards 70%. It's a very efficient way for our businesses to work is on the cloud. Tracey, do you want to add anything to that?
No, I think that was a good recap. I think the important thing to remember is that most insureds and policyholders are not asking for the cloud coverage, that it's something as an agent, if you bring it to their attention, that should that off-site server go down, that they could potentially have a business income loss. I think that that elevates you as the agent into someone who's actually helping to protect their business and protecting their assets. And so I think it's a good thing to bring up as an agent.
I do too. So, and here's another question that goes right along with that, and it's what is the coverage territory for the data breach?
It's, Michelle, do you mind if I answer that?
Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead.
Yeah, so it's worldwide coverage for the data breach. That's where that international piece comes in, and the suit, correct me if I'm wrong, the suit has to be brought in the United States, but there is coverage regardless of where it occurs, as long as the suit's brought here.
Because it has to be within the laws of the U.S.
Right.
And there's a few questions about monoline, minimum premiums, and those types of things. It cannot, this is a particular product that cannot be written monoline, right? It has to be in conjunction with a package policy.
Correct, for small commercial. If we access Hartford financial products, they can do a policy on its, a standalone policy without writing the package. Those have significantly higher premiums, as you can imagine, whenever you're writing it on a standalone basis.
Yeah, so I think the premiums, it's extremely low, depending on what you choose and what deductible for first and third party, but it's very flexible. So you can get, I forgot the limits, but 10,000 I think to 500,000 on the first party, and up to $1 million limit on the third party with different deductibles and things. And it is written on a claims made.
Correct.
So some of the premiums are actually down into like the $20.
I think
right?
$30 is our minimum premium. But yeah, $30 is
yeah, and then it goes up to whatever for the limits and
what
size
the
of the
exposures are. Yeah.
We have quite a few people asking if the presentation is going to be available. We are recording it, so we'll send you a link to that as well as some of this additional material. Some more information, or more questions about Cloud Drive. You know, where the Cloud Drive is, and you don't know where it is, so the coverage territory. That again, that's worldwide because you don't know where it is. But getting a ton of questions about that. And a copy of the policy form, and I can get a copy of the policy form too. Here's another one on and offline personal identifiable information. So in other words, is electronic and printed paper. And I think we kind of just went into that.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So our form automatically includes electronic files as well as paper files, and many of our competitors, to cover paper files, it's an additional endorsement onto their policy. So make sure that you're keeping that in mind whenever you are pursuing quotes for data breach or cyber, depending on what the carrier calls it. But certainly it is built into our policy form that automatically provides coverage for both forms, whether it's an electronic file or a paper file. Michelle, you want to say something?
No, about the only thing I'd add to that is just, think about how you operate in your own agency and how many times you probably meet with a client and you're writing personally identifiable information on a piece of paper. And just imagine a piece of paper at a lunch meeting falling on the floor and getting into the wrong hands. It can be as simple as that when it comes to paper. And not all carriers offer this, or like Tracey said, it's an additional form that has to be added on. So Hartford's got you covered.
There's maybe one or two more questions. Here's one. It's kind of a coverage question. Would this cover cyber liability? For example, if a hacker sends a virus to the insured server and they are shut down?
So that's a different coverage. What we're talking about today is data breach, which is where someone, it is either stolen, misplaced, lost, personally identifiable information, typically of employees or customers. If someone's sending a virus into their computer system and it shuts it down, that's a different exposure, and we certainly have coverages available for that, but it's something different than what we're talking about today.
Right. Here's another sample policy. There's been a couple questions about HIPAA. Does the form cover HIPAA fines, and may we endorse the client's prospects policy to include the fines?
We do not cover fines. Our data breach policy isn't intended to, for someone who's not following the rules and the guidelines that are out there, it's not intended to be a makeup for those fines that are going to be incurred. But I will say this, doctors' offices, anybody in the medical profession, because they're so HIPAA compliant and so aware of the needs of protecting that private information, they understand and desire this coverage more than any other industry out there.
I agree. I agree with that for sure. Is there any difference in the GL code with data breach, as instead of not having data breach?
No.
There's same GL code.
Yes. Yeah, we would choose the Spectrum class code based on their operations, and then if they would like to purchase the data breach coverage, then we would endorse that onto the policy.
So there's quite a few more, but I think a few of them are pretty detailed. I'm going to go ahead and thank the Hartford for being here with us. Thank you, Michelle and Tracey Hagy, for being here and answering the questions and presenting. We've had quite a few webinars based around cyber liability and data breach and things like that, but it's so important, and I think the title for the webinar was a very good one too, Demystifying, because no matter how many times you hear it, it seems like everybody's form is different, coverages are different, and some of the terminology is different. So it's nice to hear what Hartford, how Hartford defines all those terms and stuff. So I appreciate it. Let me take back the presentation and I'll give you a contact if I can.
Dwight, do you need me to stop sharing my screen? Would that help?
Yeah, maybe so. Oh, here we go. Great, thank you. So here's a few contact points for Stuckey and Company and the underwriters that you can ask additional questions or submit accounts to. Kerry is my brother, and he is a wealth of information. We just met on this. He's the manager over the commercial lines department, and his email address is kerry@stuckey.com. Michelle in our office helps us with professional liability. If it needs to go to a standalone policy, we can do it through Michelle, or Kerry can handle it. And here is just our general lines mailbox. So again, thank you, Tracey and Michelle, for coming and presenting, and look forward to our next one.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Absolutely.